Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 11 of season 3 of Arrow called Midnight City. Now I know this review is going up quite a while after the episode aired. If you're a regular viewer on my channel, you know that I recently moved and I only got my internet on Wednesday. So, the move, first week at a new job, lots of craziness going on. So obviously these reviews kind of had to fall by the wayside. But anyway, I'm getting caught up now, so let's get into it. And overall, this is a really strong episode. Everybody has some nice moments. I mean, this is a really great example of how to juggle a large cast and give everybody their moment, give everybody something interesting to do, some characterization, and while at the same time still move the plot forward. So let's just kind of get right into things and start with the smaller stuff and work our way up. Let's start with Thea and Malcolm. Now, Thea's whole thing this episode is basically like, I don't want to leave Starling City despite what Malcolm says. And eventually she does get Malcolm to sort of spell it out for her why they need to do this. Now, why exactly Malcolm was so horribly resistant to this idea? I mean, I understand he doesn't really want to compound Thea thinking badly of him, but she already knows that he's responsible for the death of over 500 people. How much worse is saying, he made an enemy out of Ra's al Ghul really going to make the situation? So I think Malcolm was being a little bit dumb there. If he'd kind of leveled with Thea right at the beginning, I don't think it would have changed anything, but he would have spared himself some grief. We also find out that the DJ guy is a member of the League of Assassins, which I'm pretty grateful for, simply because if they'd actually tried to play this guy as a genuine replacement for Roy in the romance department, I think we all would have been just gagging the entire time. Because this guy, he really knows how to play the douchey DJ sort of guy very well. And of course, his little conversation with Maceo really sets things up for Maceo coming to Starling City in the future, which should be pretty cool. That also kind of brings us to where it would be a good point to talk about Maceo and Tatsu and what was going on there. Nothing really particular to say about the Hong Kong flashbacks, just sort of Maceo going like, yeah, Amanda Waller knew I'd pull something like this. Yeah, okay, whatever. Amanda Waller, blah, 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 I'm freaking sick of Amanda Waller. Okay, so this episode we don't really understand exactly why Maceo and Tatsu are still not together. Safe to say that the fact that their son Akio is not around anymore, I think we can kind of guess probably what happened. But we do see this episode that despite all the things that have happened, that they do still care about each other, as difficult as things between them might be. And I really like that moment when Maceo has, they killed the League of Assassins who found Tatsu, and Maceo comes back from having presumably buried them, chopped him up and buried him in the woods somewhere, and having done that, literally cutting his own throat to help spare both Oliver and himself. And when he leaves, Tatsu says to him in Japanese, "Kyotsukete." Now, if you've watched a lot of anime, you may have picked up on what that word means. If you're not, or you just don't, if you haven't, or you're not familiar with Japanese, basically it means like take care. And in Japan, when you leave the house, your mom or your parents or your brothers, sisters, whoever, when you say just basically like, yeah, I'm heading out in Japanese, they say to you, "Kyotsukete." And I think this is just a little moment of us seeing kind of what Maceo and Tatsu's life as a married couple were like. A husband going off somewhere, of course, his wife would say "Kyotsukete" to him as he was leaving. So it just shows that despite whatever negativity might be between them, these people do still care about each other. And I do have to say, I really am surprised that they're taking all this time to really flesh Maceo out as a character. In the comics, he's really not a very well-defined person. It's Tatsu who's the superhero. So I don't like the idea though of that some people batted around that Maceo is going to be the one that becomes Katana. Now I don't believe for a minute the show's going to do that. They've been super respectful of the DC lore. respectful of the lore, but doing their own twist on things, and that just does not jive. So I think we will inevitably sort of see Katana sort of Tatsu take on the Katana persona. But given how crowded things are this season, it wouldn't surprise me if that's something they're saving for next season. Perhaps Masao doesn't make it out of this season, and Tatsu goes down that road in order to avenge him. Which would certainly be dealing with that. Someone from a very similar position that he used to be in, similar to what was going on with Roy, similar to what's happening with Laurel now. That would really give Oliver something very interesting to work with. And let's see here. Let's briefly talk about Ray. Again, we sort of see this episode is our chance to see sort of Ray in action. He's totally willing to jump at a guy with a Tech 9 or something, and attack him when the gang attacks City Hall. And I do love how during that meeting, when he walks into thing, basically the first thing out of his mouth is like, "We may need to consider calling in the National Guard." Now, realistically, if this stuff was going on, yeah, this is exactly what would happen. If somebody like Brick tried this sort of stuff in real life, the National Guard, the feds would be all over his ass. But you have to let some things go. This is sort of like why they can't just have Felicity call Barry every episode, just because Flash shows up, bam, problem. He solved this problem in minutes, and that's not interesting. It's the same reason why when something super crazy is going on in Gotham, Batman doesn't call for the Justice League. He doesn't call Superman and say like, "Hey, can you come give me a hand?" I mean, realistically, yes, that's probably what they would and should do. But if you do that, then Batman's just like a guy who can't deal with anybody with above a certain level. He's the guy and he's basically just a guy in a batsuit who's good at catching muggers. And it's the same thing here with Oliver and Team Arrow. So let's see. Get to see some nice stuff with Quentin. Him being brave guy, and of course we get that scene of him talking with Sarah at the end. And it's all really just they're setting up that he's going to find out the truth about Sarah eventually, in probably the worst possible way. And it's going to be a real knife to the gut for this poor guy. Of course, very nice that they got Katie Lotz to come back and do some voiceover work. I saw her name in the credits. I'm like, ooh, are we going to get to see her in a flashback or something? But yeah, this makes sense. Let me see here. Going back to Ray for a moment. Of course, we also kind of get a nice little moment where he mentions Dwarf Star Alloy, which is a nice nod to the Atom's powers in the comics. And him getting the suit does take a step forward. Now, the image of that has gotten online. I've seen it. And without spoiling anything, the suit looks pretty cool. Now, let's see. Going on. Talking about... nothing particular to say about Brick as a character. Moving on to Team Arrow. Now, this is some cool stuff. Everybody kind of has their really nice moments, and we get to see some characters interacting with other characters that they don't really have much to do with. Like, for example, Roy. We get to see him kind of having that moment with Laurel. Like, Roy is really quite clearly the person who's most accepting of the idea that Laurel is going to go down this path. And, being an angry person with something that's just eating away at you, that's driving you to do this, well, Roy understands that. That was basically kind of Roy not that long ago. So I think he understands where Laurel's coming from a place of pain and anger and loss. And he's just sort of stepping in there thinking like, okay, if I try and push her out of this, then she's just going to go out and get herself killed. If I'm there beside her, I can at least keep her alive, maybe keep her from making some of the same mistakes I did, the mistakes that Oliver was trying to stop me from making. We also get to see that scene where Roy goes and confronts Malcolm Merlyn. And I love that Roy doesn't even consider for a second saying, hey, I'll go tell Thea, because Malcolm would be like, oh no, your ex-boyfriend's just being an ass. But he does make a great point. It's like, you can't keep this from Thea forever. We know what you did. And, despite what all Malcolm says about how important Thea is to her, he still used her as a weapon to murder Sarah. And I love how Roy also doesn't even think for trying to threaten Malcolm, because he knows Malcolm. Malcolm is basically on Oliver's level. Roy knows Malcolm could take him, could wipe the floor with him. And I especially love that moment. And there's this great moment when they're talking. And I got to give a lot of credit to Colton Hayes for this, who apparently somewhere got a much more preppy looking haircut. But anyways, when he's talking with Malcolm, Malcolm's kind of just smirking and smirking and smirking, and then Malcolm just takes this little tiny step towards Roy, and you really have to watch for it, but you see Roy just this tiny bit flinch. Roy knows he's poking at a tiger, but this is something that Malcolm needed to hear. And again, it just sort of takes us a step back to sort of underline and remind us of that Malcolm manipulated Thea, and yeah, he's got a reckoning coming. Fathers and daughters discovering unpleasant truths. Quentin and Malcolm. Who'd have thought that those two guys would be in the same boat? Of course, Malcolm made this situation by, using his daughter. And Quentin did nothing wrong. He's put in this situation by his daughter. I mean, wow, what a parallel. I mean, what a contrast. Let's see. We also got to see a nice scene between Felicity and Laurel. And again, we haven't really seen too awful much between those two. Both Laurel and Roy this episode struggle with the guilt of not being able to save the one alderman. And it's really, of all people, Felicity who convinces Laurel to get back in the game. So some really, really wonderful acting there. I also liked Laurel's reaction from Dig. She's basically like, "You lost a brother. I'd thought of anybody that you would understand how I feel." And I mean, again, that's another emotional shot to the heart. She does make a great point. Nobody on this here has suffered the same loss that she and Dig have, and yet he's one of the people. He's the person on the team who's the most horribly opposed to all of this. Interesting. And let's see, what else have we got? Oh yeah, there's a couple of nice little nods to the comics this episode around. We see Thea reading a book by Brad Meltzer, who had a short run as the writer on Green Arrow and did some nice work on Justice League. We also, of course, heard the news crew refer to Roy as the Red Arrow. Of course, Red Arrow is the name that Roy goes by in the comics nowadays. Let me see, what else have we got? I mentioned that Laurel and Roy having some guilt over not being able to save the alderman, and I really liked how they worked pretty well together out there on the street. This is probably a bit of a nod to the fact that in the comics, Roy and Black Canary have always gotten along very well. They're two people who understand each other very well, and they're pretty tight. And yeah, I think that kind of covers everything that I had to say about this episode. Again, really good episode, lots of stuff going on, lots of really nice character moments, and I cannot wait to talk about the next episode with you guys. So until next time, take care and have a good one.